As you may recall, back on the State of the Union address that President Biden gave earlier this year, he announced that the United States was going to send a floating pier. They were going to send the United States Navy to build a floating pier opposite Gaza to get food aid into the beleaguered people in there to relieve some of the starvation that was already starting back then and the extreme hunger that was going on. And he was saying that was a great idea. It got a lot of thunderous applause to it. And one of the things he said at that time, and we're actually going to see this in a minute, no boots on the ground. So this is not going to put Americans at risk. This is just something we're doing to help the starving people because we care about the Palestinians. Because that was to allay some of the anger that his voting block had already exhibited in some of the voting that had been done in the presidential primary, where they had shown the willingness to make a protest vote that showed that you can't be guaranteed our votes if you don't change what you're doing with the Palestinians in the Hamas war with Israel. So that was the issue back then. Well, then a lot of time has passed. Not many people have talked about it until really today. There was a really interesting exchange at a congressional hearing between Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin on this very subject. And somebody who's been following it even closer, actually much closer than me, we have on with us today, Kelly Vlahos. You've seen her before. She's been on our show. We're very grateful to have her back. And she is the the editor of Responsible Statecraft magazine, which is excellent. You should definitely go and check that. And she's also the host of a new podcast, Trip the Beltway Fantastic, which you can see over her shoulder there. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But first of all, Kelly, just welcome back to the show. Always glad to have you here. At a hearing today, Representative Gaetz was talking to Secretary Austin, who was being grilled on quite a number of topics while he's up there, but he decided to bring this up. Now, I'll warn you. Well, actually, I won't warn you. Just roll the tape and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Ms. Lotkin just said there'll be about 1,000 U.S. service members operating a pier system off of Gaza. How many of them will have guns, Mr. Secretary?
Well, typically all of the deployed service members carry guns, and they have the ability to protect themselves if challenged.
So if someone from land in Gaza shoots at our service members who are on the $320 million pier that we're building, you're telling me our service members can shoot back?
They have the right to return fire to protect themselves. Now,
well, do we think that's like? So now I want to move to the likelihood that you think someone from land in Gaza might shoot at our service members on this pier. Do you think that's a likely scenario?
That's possible, yes.
This is a very telling moment, Mr. Secretary, because you've said something that's quite possible that could happen, right? Shots from Gaza on our service members, and then the response, our armed service members shooting live fire into Gaza. That is a possible outcome here so that we can become the Port Authority and run this pier. Right?
That's correct. I expect that we will always have the ability to protect ourselves. Don't you think that counts as
boots on the ground? President Biden told the country that we weren't going to have boots on the ground in Gaza.
And we won't.
Okay, but you guys parse the distinction between, like when Americans think boots on the ground, they think Americans in harm's way or engaged actively in a conflict. You guys seem to be sort of saying that boots on a pier connected to the ground, connected to service members shooting into Gaza, doesn't count as boots on the ground?
It does not.
I think you're going to find the American people have a different perspective on that. And if we're going to have people shooting into Gaza, we probably should have a vote on that, pursuant to our war powers.
Oh, I just almost lost it when Gaetz was walking him through that last part. And he said, wait, that there are boots on the ground, or there will be boots on the ground. No, they won't. He goes, wait a minute. A boot on a pier connected to the ground isn't boots on the ground. Nope. And there was no shame in his face at all. You correctly said, Kelly, that Biden made that emphatic statement that there will be no boots on the ground because he knows it's a trigger for the Americans. It's a red line for the people that we don't want to send people in harm's way that might get killed if it's not even our war, much less if it's a dumb war. And now then here, when this representative just told him, you just described that American boots with guns in range of potential targets on the land are going to be on this pier connected to the ground. And he still says, yeah, it's not boots on the ground. It doesn't count. That's you actually published something on this. You got to this before I did. You published this at Responsible Statecraft because you were on it before but I'm sure that this had some impact on you. Tell me what you were thinking when you published this.
Well, I know a lot of people have different views of Matt Gaetz, but God love him. I mean, he was the only one to ask about this, and with very pointed questions. And he's been very good on a number of issues involving U.S. military overseas, engaging in operations for which there is no strategy, that most of the time Congress isn't really well aware of the extent of their activities. He had a great hearing a couple weeks ago where he was talking on behalf of military families who are worried about service members who couldn't get out of Niger. And he was just very tough on this issue. And I'm just glad, Republican or Democrat, left or right, that we have members who are actually asking these questions. And the scenario that he conveyed, this, a boot on a pier connected to the beach, this is serious business, because as I've written about, and that other experts much smarter than me have pointed out, that it is going to be very difficult for the U.S. military to establish this Trident Causeway, which is about 1,800 square feet, that is connected to the beach in Gaza, without having engineers on the ground and maintaining it, not just building it, but being there to maintain it. The type of causeway needs anchoring and it needs maintenance. This isn't something they can set up and then sail away. And so there's always been this question of are they really not going to be on the ground? Second of all, they could be partnering with contractors. We know there's at least one major contractor called Fogbo that has been in talks with the U.S. military to help them and assist in some of the areas where the U.S. military can't tread, either on the beach, on that staging area, or helping with the aid distribution. But tell me, you can't tell me that the military is not going to be there front and center to oversee this massive project. And one of the things we haven't mentioned yet is the fact that the staging area on the beach was under attack last week. Under mortar fire. Now, do we know who was shooting? Do we know if they were really targeting or who they were targeting? The U.S. isn't there, but they are somewhat off the coast at this point. But there are UN representatives on the beach right now who are starting to, basically start the staging for the project, whether it be the pier, but also the humanitarian, plan. They have to build some sort of facility that is going to house the aid and then get it out of there. That came out under attack.
The Israelis are saying you've got to roll these trucks off of there. This is got to be able to go in, and then how's that going to be distributed? I mean, there's a lot of questions here. But I'll tell you, Kelly, here's one of my big worries about this. This is starting to feel uncomfortably reminiscent to the August 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we sent all these Marines in there and several other troops to try to have all these people who were trying to get out, and we had people crushing in around the gates. I think you remember that. And then all of a sudden we have a big explosion because somebody uses that opportunity to attack us. And now we have 13 Americans killed. We have hundreds of others. And that same kind of thing could happen here, because it's not just Hamas that's there. That's who everybody talks about all the time. But there are, I think, close to a dozen different violent extremist groups that have some presence in there. Who fired those mortars? We don't know. But it's not just that Americans could come under from the shore, as Gates talked about there. It could be rocket fire. It could be mortar fire. It could be RPG, rocket propelled grenades, anti-tank weapons. There's all kinds of things that could be used in there by some groups who don't like Americans, even if that harms the Palestinian people. That's the big risk in here, and we have no control over it at all. And I just fear that we could get into another mass casualty issue. And man, you talk about a political problem for the president on top of a physical security issue. This has a lot of ways it could go sideways.
Yes, and there are two other things that emerged in an Associated Press / CNN reporting on this morning when I was writing up another piece about the cost, which, by the way, is going to be $320 million on the front end, but we can get into that.
Right. Yeah, you know it's going to be higher than that, but
yeah,
anyway.
And that's like I'm reading that it's only for the first 90 days. But there were two other strange things that emerged. One, the AP reported that a engineering unit is currently training with an Israeli engineering unit on practicing how to build the causeway, which I don't know. I got to reach out to the Pentagon on this one because it doesn't really make sense. The Army knows how to build the causeway. This is part of their JLOTS training. So I don't know if it's because of the particulars of the beach and the geographical location that makes it distinct from other jobs. I don't know. But where are they training, Danny? Are they training on a beach? Are they training in the middle of the water? So not answered. Secondly, the CNN reporting said that, well, at first this causeway and pier project was thought to be temporary and maybe for 3 months, but now it's going to be more of a permanent fixture for commercial / NGO usage. Where did that come from? So basically, we're building this thing. Are we going to lease it out? Are we going to hand the keys over to somebody? Are we going to maintain it ourselves? And what does that mean, commercial and NGOs? I could see, okay, maybe the NGOs, it'll just be a permanent humanitarian corridor thing. But commercial, is this going to help bring military equipment and supplies into Gaza? Now, I have some military sources that say that it's not really, because I was like, well, maybe the placement of this causeway and pier will help the Israelis who are now building these outposts on the corridor bisecting Gaza, and maybe they need this to start pumping in supplies and weapons to those outposts. But I've been told that they have other ways of getting in things. But it just dawns on me that this seems like such a massive project. There's got to be another use for it that they're not telling us about. And I'm not trying to sound conspiratorial, but there's a huge invasion planned for Rafah. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to be pushed out on these coastal areas and tent cities. You know, maybe this is not just about humanitarian aid being delivered into Gaza, but maybe they know more than we do about what kind of evacuation plan or
refugee. I was going to say that I've heard from some sources too. Again, who can say for sure what the credibility of the information is, but some are reporting that they have heard that it would be a really swell thing if, to protect the people from Rafah, instead of just moving them into, well, who knows where, because the rest of the whole strip is already destroyed, move them onto ships off the pier for temporary housing so that they can be safe on here. And of course, once somebody goes off, the chances of them coming back seem pretty remote, low. And
right.
You know that many in Israel want to get, and especially the Israeli government, have been open about wanting to expel all but 100,000 Palestinians. I'm not sure where they come up with that number, but that means like 2 million people out. And I don't know if that's the plan, but it is suspicious.
I don't even want to think about it, but I've seen people talk about that. Like, are they going to be literally evacuating Palestinians and bringing them somewhere? And that is, you want to talk about a tripwire, because Egypt doesn't want them. Even if they did, Palestinians know once they're off that territory, they're not coming back. And like you said, there are so many Israelis who want that. And so even to talk about evacuating the Palestinians is just
and evacuate them to where? Where would they go?
Yeah, where would they go? Do you remember that there was some talk early on about encouraging world leaders to take in Palestinian refugees, and that got slapped down pretty fast because of the implications of that. But I felt like there were even Biden administration officials who were sort of flirting with that in the context of like, well, what can we do for refugees? What can we do for the Palestinians? Maybe we can find countries that would welcome them in. And it was like within like 48 hours that all that talk was just like sinkholed, because it is. I mean, you had Jared Kushner had given an interview with Harvard in which he was asked about that. And he was asked, they said, well, listen, a lot of Palestinians and their supporters are concerned because they don't think that they will be welcomed back. Like if they are evacuated somewhere. And he goes, well, there's not going to be anything left in Gaza for them to come back to anyway. And I'm thinking, if that's an indication of what Israel supporters and Israelis feel about Palestinians and about the future of Gaza, we're in trouble.
You know what's a really weird irony, Kelly, as I'm thinking about this, part of the history of Israel that not a lot of people is commonly known anyway, is that in the immediate aftermath of the World War II, when a lot of these Jews had finally, victims of the Holocaust and others that had been rounded up in ghettos, et cetera, when they were trying to get out, even after the war was over, a lot of them got put on ships and sent to different places all around the world. One of which, there was a couple of ships that I remember specifically came to New York Harbor, and we didn't want them. We said, nope, you can't stay here. So they literally turned the ship around and ended up coming back to the Middle East, into what turned out to be Israel after 1948, of course. And so now that you're talking about potentially, nobody wanted them. The Europeans didn't want them. The Western European nations didn't want them. The Americans didn't want them. And then they were just looking for a place, and then they finally landed here. And one wonders, does somebody have some idea to do the same thing to the Palestinian people now?
I don't know. There are a lot of conspiracy theories, and I think that's born out of the truth, really, that nobody trusts the government anymore. They don't trust what's coming out of these DOD briefings or the State Department or the White House. And when you have an administration that is so closely holding their cards to their vest about how these military resources are going to be spent, why they're being spent, then people just make up things. They fill in the gaps themselves, and they just are thinking the worst right now. And I don't blame them, because of the history of U.S. foreign policy writ large.
Kelly, look, is there any better example of what you're saying than right here, what we just showed? You have President Joe Biden saying no boots on the ground, and then now the Secretary of Defense going, well, yeah, they're on a pier, but yeah, of course they're on the ground. It's on. I mean, you can't make that distinction. We're not stupid. You may be treating us like we're stupid, but we're not. And when they see that, then why do I believe anything else that's coming out of the president when I see him so egregiously lying on something as simple as, are there boots on the ground or not? Just be honest about it. Americans aren't going to go, oh, wait, we're not going to do a pier if there's boots on the ground, as long as you tell us. But when you tell us one thing and then it's blatantly obvious that the truth is opposite.
I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
I mean, that just shatters truth.
Right. And so you don't know what to believe. I mean, I'll put in a good word for Austin here. I don't think he was treating Americans as they were stupid when he was answering Matt Gaetz's question, because he was very forthright and honest. Are these troops going to be in harm's way? Well, yeah. Could they be attacked? Quite possibly. Will they shoot back if they're shot at? Yes, they have the ability and the authority to do so. So he could have flipped and he could have flopped and he could have just sort of danced his way around those questions, but he didn't, which makes me wonder how much is the military invested in this as a project? I mean, not just physically and resource wise, But I mean, was this an idea cooked up by the White House, by the State Department, like National Security Council, and then the U.S. military comes in and makes it fleshes it out? I mean, I have no doubt that the U.S. Army, which is building this pier and causeway, have the ability to put this thing up sometime this month. It might not be by mid-May. I think they could. They're trained to do that. But for what reason, and at what cost? And not just the money, but the U.S. troops that are put in harm's way and could be part of a trigger situation.
Yeah.
In terms of like getting shot at, shooting back,
Right.
And then next thing you know,
right.
and what if they shoot and they kill Palestinian civilians?
Yeah, that's why I say, that's why I went back to that cobbled 2021 issue, because so many 100 plus civilians, or maybe it was 200, I can't remember the number, were killed in the process of that. And that's, that kind of thing goes back and forth. And a lot of this new information comes out that CNN just uncovered. Some of the deaths could have been because of we were shooting at the person, whoever was doing the bombing. That same thing can happen again here. This can go so wrong. And look, we had a show on earlier today, Kelly, where we were talking about, some of these new reports out that the large portions of the Palestinian population may already be past the point of no return and may die of starvation and malnutrition, even if food aid comes in. So I am all for, and have always been emphatically for, getting lots of aid in there immediately. But that's not by building a pier and putting American troops at risk. It's by telling them to open the damn gates and roll the stuff in today. That's what's so anguishing to me.
We could be delivering that aid, Danny, and it could sit in warehouses on that beach for all we know, because the real F up here, the real bottleneck is the Israeli checkpoints, and their ability or their decision to let specific trucks in. So you had 500 trucks going in before the war. Now we maybe have 100, maybe 150 going in. Most of that is because the Israelis aren't letting the trucks in. And then there's a security question. So they let the trucks in and people are delivering it, and they're getting killed by Israeli airstrikes and attacks while they're delivering the food. How are we guaranteed that none of that's going to happen? That all the trucks are going to go through, that none of them will get attacked, they'll actually get to the people? That's not part of the plan. We won't have control over that because, again, we're not going to have boots on the ground. So you still run into the same problems that they're having already with the aid.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could just have piles and piles and piles of food sitting on that beach rotting for all we know.
Yeah. And that's part of this whole anguishing. This is a microcosm of the bigger picture. We have no strategy. We don't even know what we want to accomplish. We don't know what the end state is. So anything will just action. It's what's called tactical action in the military. If you don't actually have a strategy, you can do something. You can build a pier, you can send a truck, but towards what end? What's the objective? What do you want to? Where is this supposed to go? If you don't know, then you're just drifting, and that's exactly what we're doing here. And that's
just breaking
really
my heart. That those images of that aid coming down, those airdrops, because people died during those situations.
Yeah,
by getting hit by the food.
Or drowning in the water trying to get them out there. That also
drowning them. And then the desperation of the people that are running out there. I mean, can you imagine your family, your children running out for just some scraps of food that the United States is dropping for you? I mean, it's heartbreaking.
And it was to me too. The other one was that, when the Israelis killed a bunch of the people that were trying to get food aid, and they showed those nighttime drone pictures from above, and you just see it look literally like ants swarming this truck, showing the desperation. And it broke my heart and still does.
Yeah, these people are just sitting on the beach day in and day out waiting for those airdrops, and that beach is going to metastasize in population once this Rafah invasion happens. So that's why I'm just wondering about this whole humanitarian corridor. Does the Biden administration know that this Rafah ground invasion is going to happen, whether they've been trying to pressure them against it or not? And they've kind of told the Israelis, well, we'll, if you bring all these people to the beach, we'll help them. I don't know. Like everybody else in America, I don't know. And I don't want to believe, or I can't believe everything that's coming out of the White House at face value. So I'm trying to figure it out in real time, but it just doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense.
Yeah, well, there's American foreign policy in a nutshell. So congratulations. You have figured that part of it out. Well, listen, Kelly, thanks so much for coming on today, and especially on such short notice.
Sure.
Covering this and all this great reporting you do. And we certainly encourage people to go to Responsible Statecraft, because you guys put out some great work there. And now then your podcast on YouTube. So we'll look forward to that, and we'll look forward to being on it one of these days, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Danny.
And we thank you guys for coming on too as well. You can always count on us to be unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth and breaking news when it happens like this, so you know the truth behind what you may see on the mainstream media. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this with your friends, and we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.